often when we're dealing with populations that are disadvantaged or low income, or they have some type of disadvantage, there is a desire to, I have what you need, let me come save you from your reality. And so one of the things around social justice orientation is that even in the poorest of communities, there are community assets there, and that the people that you serve are the best experts to tell you what they need. So we take this knowledge, but we approach it as a respectful observer or a partner in the community intervention. But that community is the expert in terms of what they need. So really, and it's also a terminology called toxic charity that also falls within that same framework of saviorship. People don't need you to save them. People need you to empower them based on the assets that they already have. Here are some other things to consider. Don't hide behind colorblind rhetoric. And don't get, sometimes when people do things, it's not intentional to offend you. This is how we have been socialized. So if someone says, when I see you, I don't see color, I know where you were going, but I want you to see this because this is the package that I come in, how I view the world, and it's okay. Difference is okay. So we really, I think we pretty much know that the United States of America is a wonderful salad, not necessarily a melting pot, and it's okay to be a tomato. It's okay to be an olive if that's what you like, but it's okay for us to be different. And I think, and I know that people respect when you see them. And it also says that if you don't see my color, there's something inherently uncomfortable for you in seeing my color. So push past that, and you'll find that when you're trying to make connections, that they're genuine ones, and people just respect the fact that you considered them enough to ask the question, how do you identify? How do you move through the world? What is that like for you? As all of us here, me included, challenge your bias every day. Always ask yourself, how do I know this to be true about this group? Am I making decisions based on my bias? Personally, in terms of connections, and even the people that we consider for volunteer opportunities at nonprofits, internships, our unconscious bias impacts everything that we do. Also, again, learning about the experience of marginalized groups, especially some of you serve, I think, Justin talked about the idea of serving immigrant and refugee communities in Clarkston, Georgia. If you're not familiar with this area, Clarkston is an area right next to Stone Mountain here in the Atlanta area that has a huge Hmong population, Burmese, Somali population there. And it's very, very important to know what the cultural norms are, what's acceptable, what's not. How do you offer help in a way that makes sense for this population that is new here and vulnerable? So really never assuming, even if you are the member of the community, don't assume that you know what the cultural norms are. I've had to learn that the hard way, being African American from California and coming to the South, and unintentionally offending some of the members of my community because I have a completely different orientation and coming of age experience. So really meeting people where they are and not making assumptions just because we might look the same way that we believe the same way. We experience that. We have these excellent ideas, and then we go into the community, and the community's like, okay, we don't want that. No, that's not going to work. And so we get discouraged. And so really, if your end goal is like, when you really want to achieve your mission, you'll do nothing to stop. And often just ask the question. If you don't know, just say, I don't know. There is something interesting about being in professional situations, and people struggle with the idea that they don't know. And sometimes I'll say, I don't know how to best serve you. What would resonate with you? What is it going to take for you to send? You live in the projects and your baby wants to be a ballerina. What is the best way to get her there? What are the barriers that keep you from putting your baby in these classes? What can we do to make it better? Just those open-ended questions can get you so much mileage with human connections. So excellent. Okay, so let's talk about just really from a legal perspective. We talked about the idea of putting some protective measures in place in your respective organization so you don't unintentionally end up with a lawsuit because you've offended someone or unintentionally discriminated against someone or offered preferential treatment. So we want to talk about what the laws say. So really being intentional, putting these protective measures in place lays the foundation for a diverse and inclusive work culture. We have to start with the humanness first. As a foundation for any meaningful DEI work. Ensure all staff and leaders receive training on DEI, cultural humility or competency, whichever one you use, equal opportunity laws for protected groups at and at a minimum, and this is subject matter that should be covered as a normal way of how you do business. Your HR person, many of us are small nonprofits. If your HR person is also the CEO, then you have to have knowledge, because even amongst private nonprofits, people can still file complaints with the EEOC for the state. So you're still vulnerable. And as I said, it could be a safeguard against lawsuits. And I know that all of us don't want that. So really, the watershed event that really provided protection against discrimination was the Civil Rights Act of 1964. The beginnings of it was no segregation in public places, no discrimination in employment based on race, gender, or national origin. And the Equal Opportunity Commission is the vehicle that implements the 1964 Civil Rights Act. So every state, publicly funded institutions have an EEOC officer. If you're a private nonprofit, you would refer to the EEOC Commission for your state or your local jurisdiction. There have been amendments to add additional protective groups. The 1990 Americans with Disabilities Act protects against discrimination based on physical or mental ability in jobs, schools, transportation. This is what allows accommodations in public school education on jobs stem directly from this law. And as recently as June to July of this year, discrimination against LGBT employees and transgender employees has been added to the language because of cases of discrimination and hiring practices that disadvantage members of this community. So in privilege exercise, we talked about this whole idea of hair texture and even head covering, honestly, being a detriment to getting jobs or even being considered for opportunities. So I'm not sure if many of you are aware, but the Crown Act of 2019 was introduced California Senator Holly Mitchell to prohibit discrimination based on having afros, locks, anything that how your hair naturally grows out of your head. There were cases where children were being expelled from school because of braids or traditional ethnic or cultural hairstyles, not being able to go to school, not being considered for job opportunities because of your natural hair texture. So there was legislation that was put forward in 2019, and the anniversary of that was July 3rd of this year. So so when we talk about institutionalized racism, how we break down those barriers is supporting elected officials that support legislation to create opportunity and access for everyone. That is one of the key ways that we attack it from an institutional level. And so now this law has been passed in California and has been introduced in New York, New Jersey, Virginia, as well as being introduced in 23 other states. So one thing that I need to do as homework is to see where this legislation is in the state of Georgia, and you investigate where it is in your state. Just to highlight who the protected classes are. Um, how you identify your sex, your gender, racial or ethnic origin, your religion, your age, disability is a protected group.